October 26, 1942. Wright Field, Ohio. A cold wind slices across the concrete as Captain James Jim Howard, U.S. Army Air Forces, pulls his leather gloves tighter and watches the unfamiliar fighter taxi into view. The engine note is sharp but oddly restrained, not the confident roar he's used to hearing from a P-47 Thunderbolt. The aircraft's long nose and laminar flow wings give it a sleek, almost European look. Someone behind him mutters, half amused, half dismissive. "Looks fast on paper," a test pilot says. "But that Allison engine's going to choke above 20,000. Howard doesn't answer. He's heard it all week. The aircraft is the North American P-51 Mustang, and among fighter pilots in late 1942, it has a reputation, not a flattering one. On the ground, engineers from North American Aviation hover near the flight line, clipboards in hand. They are proud of the airframe. It was designed at record speed, drawn up in just 117 days in response to a British request for a new fighter. Aerodynamically, it is revolutionary. A laminar flow wing that reduces drag, a radiator scoop designed to exploit the Meredith effect, actually generating thrust at speed. But none of that matters to the men who have to fight in it. Because under the Mustang's sleek skin sits the Allison V1710 engine, an engine that performs well at low altitude and falls apart where the air war over Europe is being fought. Above 20,000 feet, where bombers fly and German interceptors wait, the Allison loses power. No two-stage supercharger. No high-altitude muscle. Against Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, the Mustang feels like a knife brought to a gunfight. Pilots know it. They joke about it. Some refuse to fly it if they can avoid it. Howard watches as the prototype lifts off, wheels folding cleanly into the wings. The aircraft climbs smoothly, but he already knows what the data will show. At altitude, it will struggle. Again. And yet, far away across the Atlantic, the British see something different. November 1942. Duxford Airfield, England. Rain beads across the canopy of a Royal Air Force, Mustang Mk.I, as Squadron Leader Jeffrey Page taxis into position. The RAF doesn't use the Mustang the way the Americans imagine fighters should be used. They don't send it high to duel enemy interceptors. They send it low. At treetop height over occupied France, the Mustang is a predator. Its range is extraordinary. Its handling is smooth and forgiving. Flying armed reconnaissance, rhubarb missions, RAF pilots streak across rail yards, airfields, and convoys with speed the Luftwaffe struggles to match at low altitude. British pilots praise the aircraft's visibility and responsiveness. They file reports filled with cautious optimism. But every report ends the same way. Exceptional airframe. Engine inadequate for high-altitude combat. Back in the United States, those words land like a verdict. By late 1942, the air war over Europe is entering a brutal phase. 8th Air Force bombers are pushing deeper into occupied territory, Rouen, Lille, Bremen. Without long-range escort, B-17s and B-24s are being torn apart. The P-47 Thunderbolt is powerful, but it drinks fuel like a drowning man. The P-38 Lightning has range, but it's mechanically complex and temperamental in European weather. What the USAAF needs is obvious. A fighter that can escort bombers all the way to Germany and back. The Mustang could be that aircraft. But not like this. December 1942. Wright Field. Inside a drafty hangar, engineers argue beneath the wing of a stripped-down P-51. Chalk marks cover the fuselage. Tools lie scattered across oil-stained concrete. One man stands slightly apart from the rest. Ronald Harker, Rolls-Royce test pilot, has flown the Mustang with the Merlin engine already installed, quietly, experimentally in Britain. He knows what the aircraft can become. He clears his throat. "You're wasting this airplane," he says flatly. The room stills. Harker explains what British engineers have already proven. When the Mustang is fitted with the Rolls-Royce Merlin 61, equipped with a two-stage, two-speed supercharger, the entire aircraft transforms. At 30,000 feet, it doesn't fade. It comes alive. The Merlin pulls hard where the Allison suffocates. Speed jumps. Climb rate soars. High-altitude performance matches, and sometimes exceeds, anything the Luftwaffe can field. The Mustang doesn't just survive up there. It dominates. There is resistance. Re-engineering an aircraft in wartime is risky. Production lines are already stretched thin. Switching engines means delays, retooling political battles. But the losses over Europe are becoming impossible to ignore. By early 1943, bomber crews are calling their missions milk runs to slaughter. Something has to change. January 1943. In Glenwood, California. Inside North American's factory, the first P-51B airframe rolls forward, its nose redesigned, its mounts rebuilt to accept a new heart. Not British-built Merlins, but American ones. Packard V1650-3 engines, license-produced with meticulous care. On the factory floor, workers pause to watch the aircraft move past. They can't yet know what it will become. But somewhere in the metal, the future of the air war is taking shape. On the flight line weeks later, Captain Jim Howard stands once again, helmet under his arm. He listens as the Merlin starts. This time the sound is different. Deeper. Stronger. Confident. The Mustang rolls. You feel it before you see it, the sense that something has changed. And as the aircraft lifts into the winter sky, climbing hard, refusing to weaken as it climbs higher and higher, the jokes begin to die. High above the clouds, the P-51 is no longer struggling to breathe. It is waiting. March 13, 1943. Eglin Field, Florida. The sun glints off the Gulf as Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, recently returned from Britain, watches the Mustang claw upward through thin air. The altimeter needle passes 25,000 feet, then 30,000. Still climbing. Inside the cockpit, the pilot eases the throttle forward. The Packard-built Merlin V1650 responds instantly. No sputter, no hesitation. Manifold pressure holds steady. The supercharger shifts smoothly into high gear, and the aircraft surges again. On the ground, stopwatches click. This is the moment the skeptics had said would never come. The Mustang levels out at altitude and accelerates. The needle sweeps past numbers the Allison-powered aircraft could never reach up here. Engineers exchange glances. Test officers scribble furiously. Someone breaks the silence. Jesus, one of them murmurs. It's still pulling. The data doesn't lie. With the Merlin, the P-51 is faster than the Bf-109G at altitude. It can climb with the FW-190A. And unlike either, it can keep going, hundreds of miles farther than any American escort fighter yet fielded. For the first time since the daylight bombing campaign began, the USAAF has a machine that can follow the bombers all the way in and stay with them. April 1943. Washington, D.C. In briefing rooms thick with cigarette smoke, senior commanders confront the numbers. Loss rates are unsustainable. Entire bomber crews are being lost over targets like Bremen and Schweinfurt. The Luftwaffe knows the limits of Allied escort fighters and exploits them mercilessly. German pilots wait. They climb above the bomber streams, then dive in once the escorts turn back. Head-on attacks. Cannon fire. Then disengage before anyone can stop them. The Mustang threatens to break that pattern. Orders go out quietly at first. Priority production. Accelerated training. Squadrons earmarked for conversion. The pilots chosen to fly it are veterans, men who have watched friends vanish in fireballs over Europe. They are cautious. They have been promised miracles before. November 29, 1943. RAF Bottisham, England. A bitter wind howls across the field as ground crews pull canvas covers from a line of unfamiliar fighters. The men of the 357th Fighter Group gather around, boots crunching on frost-hardened grass. The aircraft before them looks lean, predatory. Long nose, razor-thin wings, a cockpit set far back, like a sprinter coiled at the blocks. Major Leonard Kit Carson, the group commander, runs a gloved hand along the fuselage. "Gentlemen," he says, voice sharp in the cold air, "this is the airplane that's going to change how we fight this war." Some of the pilots exchange skeptical looks. They've heard speeches like that before. But when they climb into the cockpit and start the Merlin, the doubt begins to erode. The engine doesn't just run. It growls. Training flights reveal the truth quickly. At altitude, the Mustang is smooth and deadly precise. Control pressures remain light, even above 30,000 feet. Visibility over the nose is excellent. The aircraft accelerates in a dive like nothing they've flown before, and holds energy through turns that would bleed speed from heavier fighters. And then there's the range. Drop tanks fitted under the wings extend the Mustang's reach to over 1,500 miles. Berlin is no longer out of reach. December 1st, 1943. Over the North Sea. A formation of B-17 flying fortresses drones eastward, contrails stretching white across a pale winter sky. This time, something is different. The escorts don't turn back at the German coast. They stay. P-51 slide into position above and alongside the bombers, weaving lazily, conserving fuel. Their pilots scan the high sun, waiting. Across the channel, Luftwaffe radar stations plot the raid. Fighter controllers issue vectors. Bf-109s and FW-190 scramble, climbing hard to intercept. German pilots expect the usual pattern. They don't get it. As the interceptors crest above the bomber stream, Mustangs are already there, higher than expected, faster than anticipated. The first engagement is brief and violent. A German pilot rolls into a diving attack and finds a silver fighter already on his tail. .50 caliber tracers arc past his canopy. He brakes hard, shocked by how quickly the American aircraft responds. This is no lumbering escort. This fighter hunts. Word spreads fast through the Luftwaffe. The Americans have a new airplane. One that doesn't leave. One that won't disengage. One that follows you down or chases you up. By early 1944, German pilots begin altering tactics. Attacks grow more cautious. Engagements shorter. Losses mount. And for the bomber crews, something unfamiliar settles in. Relief. They are no longer alone over Germany. Above them, the Mustangs circle patiently, engines humming, waiting for the next challenge. The aircraft once mocked for its weakness at altitude has become something else entirely. A guardian. A predator. And the Luftwaffe is about to learn what happens when the escort refuses to go home. January 11, 1944. 28,000 feet over central Germany. The bomber stream stretches to the horizon, hundreds of B-17s and B-24s, engines droning in a steady, metallic rhythm. Inside his Mustang's cockpit, Captain James "Jim" Howard, now assigned to the 356th Fighter Group, rolls his shoulders against the harness and scans the high sun. Below him the bombers hold formation, box after box, silver and vulnerable. This is the point where, months earlier, the escorts would have peeled away. Not today. Howard glances at his fuel gauges. Drop tanks still feeding. Engine temperature steady. The Merlin hums like it could do this all day. Over the radio, a calm voice breaks the monotony. Bandits, 1 o'clock high, multiple contacts. Howard feels the familiar tightening in his chest. He shoves the throttle forward, and the Mustang responds instantly, nose rising, speed building. The aircraft doesn't hesitate, it surges. Above the bombers, dark specks resolve into Messerschmitt Bf-109Gs, climbing to position for a head-on pass. It's a tactic that has slaughtered bombers for months. High speed, short exposure, deadly accuracy. Howard keys his mic. Blue flight with me, let's take the high ones. The Mustangs climb through their own contrails, sunlight flashing off wings and canopies. At this altitude, the air is thin, cold, and unforgiving, but the P-51 is in its element. The German fighters roll in, and for the first time, they meet resistance before the attack. Howard lines up on a Messerschmitt crossing left to right. The closure rate is terrifying. He leads slightly and squeezes the trigger. 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns hammer in unison. The Mustang shudders as a stream of tracers reaches out. The German pilot brakes hard, abandoning his run. Howard flashes past, heart pounding, and pulls into a climbing turn. The Mustang holds energy. The Messerschmitt does not. Within seconds, Howard is back on its tail. This isn't how it's supposed to go. German pilots are trained to exploit the escort's weaknesses, to dive away once the Americans lose speed or altitude. But the Mustang stays with them, climbing, turning, refusing to let go. Across the sky, similar fights erupt. P-51s dive through formations, slash attacks coordinated and aggressive. They don't just shield the bombers, they push outward, taking the fight to the interceptors before they can form. Below, bomber gunners watch in disbelief as silver fighters streak past, not retreating, not orbiting defensively, but hunting. For the first time, the escorts own the airspace. Same day. Luftwaffe airfield, southern Germany. Oberleutnant Karl Brenner slams his canopy shut and taxis in, hands shaking. His aircraft bears fresh bullet holes. 2 men from his staffel didn't come back. Inside the briefing hut, the mood is grim. These new Mustangs, someone says quietly. They climb with us, they dive with us, they don't break off. The room falls silent. The implications are obvious and terrifying. The Luftwaffe's entire defensive doctrine is built on the assumption that American fighters cannot stay long. Now that assumption is dead. Back over Germany, the bombers reach their targets with escorts still overhead. Flak bursts bloom black and violent, rocking aircraft, tearing holes in wings and fuselages. But the familiar swarms of fighters are fewer, more hesitant. Those that attack are intercepted quickly. And then something even more shocking happens. The Mustangs follow the Germans home. January-February 1944. Deep over the Rhine. New orders ripple through fighter groups. Do not remain glued to the bombers. Pursue enemy aircraft. Attack airfields of opportunity. The strategy is radical, controversial, deadly. P-51s range ahead of the bomber stream, sweeping known Luftwaffe assembly points. They catch German fighters climbing, heavy with fuel and ammunition, before they can form up. They strafe airfields, destroy aircraft on the ground, force the Luftwaffe to react instead of plan. German pilots begin flying less. Training hours are cut. Experienced veterans are lost faster than they can be replaced. New pilots arrive at squadrons with barely enough hours to survive, let alone fight. The balance of the air war is shifting, visibly, irreversibly. For men like Jim Howard, the change is unmistakable. On earlier missions, he'd counted minutes until the turn-back point, knowing that beyond it, the bombers were on their own. Now he watches the fuel gauges with a different feeling. Confidence. The Mustang isn't just escorting anymore. It is dominating. And with every mission deeper into Germany, the Luftwaffe bleeds strength it cannot replace. The aircraft that once drew laughter on American flight lines has become the sharpest blade in the Allied arsenal. And as spring approaches, that blade will be used not just to protect bombers, but to carve open the sky itself. February 20th, 1944. RAF Debden, England. Dawn creeps over the Essex countryside as ground crews swarm the flight line. Engines cough to life one by one, Merlin exhausts sending pale flames into the cold air. Frost cracks beneath boots. The smell of oil and gasoline hangs thick. Captain Jim Howard straps in and checks his map board. Today's target isn't a rail yard or a coastal city. It's the German aircraft industry itself. Operation Argument, what the men will soon call Big Week, is about to begin. For 6 days, Allied bombers will hammer aircraft factories across the Reich, Leipzig, Regensburg, Augsburg. And for 6 days, the Luftwaffe will be forced to rise and fight, or watch its future burn. Howard snaps his canopy shut. The Merlin's vibration runs up through the seat, steady and reassuring. Over the radio, the group commander's voice cuts in. "Gentlemen, stay with your wingmen. We're going all the way." Everyone understands what that means. Berlin Range. Germany's heart. No turning back. At altitude, contrails lace the sky as the bomber streams assemble. Hundreds of aircraft settle into their lanes, a vast, mechanical armada pushing east. The Mustangs take position high and forward, no longer tethered, no longer reactive. They are the point of the spear. Howard peers into the glare, eyes searching for movement. He doesn't have to wait long. Bandits 12 o'clock high, lots of them. The Luftwaffe comes up in strength. Bf-109Gs and FW-190 as climb hard, their pilots knowing what's at stake. If they fail today, there may not be another chance to stop the bombers in numbers. The Germans form for coordinated attacks, and the Mustangs hit them before they can. Howard rolls inverted and dives. Airspeed builds rapidly, 350, 400 miles per hour. The Mustang is rock solid. He pulls through the dive and lines up on a climbing Focke-Wulf. The German pilot never sees him. A burst of .50 caliber fire rips through the fuselage. The FW-190 snaps into a roll and falls away, trailing smoke. Howard doesn't follow it down. He's already looking for the next target. That's the difference now. The Mustang doesn't need to linger, doesn't need to cling defensively to the bombers. It can strike, disengage, and climb back to altitude in seconds. All across the sky, P-51 slash through German formations. The Luftwaffe's carefully timed attacks collapse into chaos, as pilots are forced to defend themselves instead of lining up on the bombers. Below, bomber gunners stare upward, stunned. For the first time, the escorts are not reacting to attacks. They are dictating them. February 21st, 24th, 1944, over central Germany. Day after day, the pattern repeats. German fighters rise to intercept and are met early, aggressively, relentlessly. The Mustangs stay high, using altitude as currency, spending it in devastating dives and reclaiming it with the Merlin's power. Losses mount. Veteran German pilots are killed or forced down. Replacement pilots rush through training, find themselves facing an enemy aircraft that outclimbs them, outturns them at speed, and follows them wherever they go. The psychological toll is immediate. Luftwaffe radio chatter grows frantic. Controllers struggle to keep formations together. Squadrons report being engaged before reaching attack altitude. And worse, when pilots try to disengage, the Mustangs come with them. February 24th, 1944. Near Gotha, Howard spots a cluster of German fighters diving away from the bomber stream. He hesitates only a moment before pushing the nose down. Blue flight, follow me. They chase the Germans toward their airfield. The ground rushes up fast. Flak puffs appear, scattered and hurried. Howard levels out just above the treetops. Ahead, the airfield comes into view, hangars, parked aircraft, fuel trucks scrambling. This was unthinkable months ago. He lines up on a parked fighter and fires. Metal fragments erupt. Another Mustang rakes a hangar. A third hits a fuel truck, sending a column of black smoke skyward. They are gone in seconds, climbing hard back toward the bombers. Behind them, the Luftwaffe loses aircraft without ever getting into the fight. By the end of Big Week, the numbers are stark. The Germans have lost hundreds of fighters and, more critically, irreplaceable pilots. Production is disrupted. Training units are raided. Airfields are no longer safe. The Luftwaffe still exists, but it is wounded, and it knows it. Back at Debden, Howard climbs down from his Mustang, legs unsteady, throat dry. Around him, ground crews count bullet holes, pat battered fuselages like loyal horses returned from a hard ride. The jokes are gone now. No one mocks the Mustang anymore. They look at it with something closer to reverence. Because the truth is clear to every man on the field. The P-51 didn't just extend the bomber escort. It broke the Luftwaffe's grip on the sky. And with air superiority slipping from German hands, the clock on the war in Europe has begun to tick much faster. The Mustang idles on the ramp, Merlin ticking as it cools, a quiet, lethal presence. Its work is not finished. June 6, 1944. 21,000 feet over Normandy, France. The channel below is choked with ships, thousands of them, gray hulls cutting white wakes toward the French coast. The sky is already alive with aircraft, layered in altitude like invisible highways. Captain Jim Howard flies just above the cloud tops, his Mustang steady, Merlin smooth. Beneath him, the largest invasion force in history is crossing the water. D-Day. Unlike the bomber escorts of months earlier, today's mission is not about a single target deep in Germany. It is about owning the air everywhere all at once. The Mustangs fan out ahead of the invasion fleet, hunting. German fighters rise in scattered groups, hesitant, fragmented. The Luftwaffe no longer attacks in mass. It can't afford to. Howard spots a pair of Bf-109s climbing from inland. He rolls toward them, sunlight flashing off his wings. They turn away. He chases. The fight is brief and one-sided. The Mustangs hold altitude, dive at will, and climb away untouched. German pilots break contact early, unwilling to commit. They have learned what happens when they do. Across Normandy, the story repeats itself. By mid-morning, Allied aircraft move almost uncontested over the beaches. Troops land under a sky that belongs to them. German armor moves only at night, hiding from fighters that now roam freely by day. The transformation is complete. The P-51 is no longer just an escort. It is the standard. Summer 1944. Over France and Germany. The Mustang becomes the yardstick by which all fighters are judged. American aces rack up victories. Names like George Preddy, Bud Anderson, and Chuck Yeager become synonymous with the aircraft. They speak of its balance, its forgiveness, the way it tells you what it can do and what it cannot. German pilots, when captured, talk about the Mustang with grim respect. It is fast enough to dictate engagement, agile enough to survive mistakes, long-legged enough to appear where no escort should be. The Luftwaffe adapts where it can, new tactics, heavier armament, desperate measures. But it cannot solve the fundamental problem. The Mustang is everywhere. March 1945. Over central Germany. Howard flies his final combat missions as the Reich collapses below. Rail yards burn. Roads clog with refugees and retreating troops. German fighters are rare now, and when they appear, they are often flown by boys or exhausted veterans. There is no sense of triumph in the cockpit, only inevitability. The P-51 circles above the wreckage of a defeated air force, an aircraft born from doubt and skepticism, now unchallenged. May 8, 1945. Europe. The guns fall silent. On airfields across the continent, Mustangs sit with paint chipped and engines worn, their work finally done. Men climb out of cockpits and look at them one last time. They remember the jokes, the dismissive laughter, the belief that this airplane would never matter. They were wrong, because the P-51 Mustang did not just escort bombers. It changed the rhythm of the war in the air. It made daylight bombing possible. It stripped the Luftwaffe of initiative. And it proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon is not the one that arrives loud and powerful, but the one that arrives ready to learn, and then refuses to leave.